stable. I did notice the guppies, who initially appeared to threaten the fire ants, had finally grown bored of terrorizing them. And as for the ants, it was amazing to observe them now impressively proficient at finding various ways to make it to dry land. Any ants stranded on Frogbit Islands were now very effective at synchronized paddling to nearby wood. The ants even cooperatively formed bridges on the water surface, using their own bodies to gain access to other Frogbit Islands. From there, ants found neat staircases to dry land, like these natural ropes of Spanish moss. Even though the ant colony had been moving in for almost 12 hours now, there was still a lot of the colony left to move out. The Fire Nation was truly a massive kingdom. I didn't even know if the queen had moved in yet. She usually doesn't move out until a certain percentage of the ant colony is moved out. Perhaps because she needs to absolutely be sure the new home is secure and safe, complete with necessary royal interior preparations. She is, after all, a VIP and needs to have all her diva requirements met before her grand entrance. And also perhaps because she needs the majority of the ant colony to be around her at all times. It's unclear whether she decides when it's okay for her to move out or when the colony decides for her. I guess that's something we'll never know. Meanwhile, at ground level, the construction of nests were well underway. I was amazed to see the ants building anthills right up to the edge. They towered high like great forts situated at the water's edge. How they even managed to pull off attaching sections of soil vertically to the glass was beyond me. Talk about incredible architects, wouldn't you say? What's amazing about all this is that had this been humans, it would have been a huge architectural operation, with several teams overlooking different aspects of the construction, following a master blueprint. But with these fire ants, there are no job-specific teams, no master blueprint, but just one huge colony, all working together, following some collective intelligence, which will ultimately result in a massive, complex underground sanctuary. Can you believe it? The Fire Nation just astounds me. I wonder where they're gonna choose to set up their garbage site. Let's hope not in the water. I was relieved to note that our barrier of fluon was working at keeping the ants inside the setup. Thank goodness I didn't have to worry about the ants escaping. For now, anyway. The Fire Nation was at this point busy transporting the brood. These young fire ants were the lucky ones to emerge from their pupae as the future first generation of Selva de Fuegens. It was also satisfying to see that this entire immigration operation seemed to be under control and running smoothly now. And then, I saw this. AC family, this kind of caught me off guard. Huge larvae! Oh boy, the elates are coming. I completely forgot it was the season. So the reason this was an area of concern was because the Fire Nation was now starting to produce young queens and males with wings for this year's nuptial flights. And I didn't exactly have a plan for dealing with that yet, but I think we have some time to formulate a contingency plan of some kind. By morning, our fish were waking up to greet the new day. Peeking into the hybrid nests, I was happy to discover that almost all of the colony had moved out overnight, and most certainly, so did the Fire Nation Queen. And so AC family, later that night, after disconnecting their evacuated old home, I could officially announce that the Fire Nation had completely moved in to their new territories. This massive jungle river paludarium known as the Selva de Fuego, a replication of the fire ant motherland we know as the Amazon River jungle. The day before, I was worried this jungle river habitat was unsuitable for the Fire Nation, that the river would end up killing the colony. But now, 36 hours later, I was surprised to note that the surface of our river was crystal clear and free of ants, and our river floor also fire ant body free. This to me meant the fire ants had learned over this short period of time how to live around this moving body of water. I knew they would figure it out. I loved watching the ants living in the Selva de Fuego. They began establishing clear trails, busy ant highways across the soils to other entrances nearby. It was amazing to see that the Fire Nation had claimed these territories theirs. And so did the fish. I caught the ram cichlids fully defending the best section of the river with clear view of the ants. It seems the cichlids were unwilling to share this prime area for ant watching. So now, AC family, are you ready for this? A final surprise that I think you guys might like a lot. So we had the plants, we had the river, we had the aquatic animals, and we had the ants. But there was one final touch that I had planned to make this a true Amazon rainforest. And oh, AC family, sit back. It's time. At every 7 o'clock, right on the dot, something amazing starts to happen overhead in the Selva de Fuego. Something great and life-giving. Rain. Using some tubing and an automatic timer, I figured out a way to recreate a mini rain shower for 1 minute within the Selva de Fuego every morning and night. It took a lot of testing and adjusting, but eventually I managed to get the raindrops to fall perfectly and evenly like rain. Now I didn't have to worry about watering the jungle, as it had its own storm system. As the life-giving raindrops fell hitting the plants and soils, it seemed as though it was a celebratory heavenly sign for all the inhabitants of the rainforest that they had been blessed with a new, perfectly self-functioning home to call their own. After the rains, as is our AC tradition, I offered the Fire Nation a housewarming gift. I gave them, on behalf of we, the AC family, a mighty cockroach feast on a stick for our beloved ants to enjoy, who are now super hungry from the great move. They came swarming to the feast. Watching the ants come pouring out of their underground castles was amazing. It's moments like these that ant keepers live for. I cherish the sight, triumphant and awe-inspiring. The one thing I learned from this whole experience was that one cannot completely predict how nature will unfold, no matter how thoroughly you think you have all bases covered and all blueprints drawn up. I discovered on this day that with nature, there was no perfect contingency plan, as it clearly has a mind of its own. One can only guide life in a certain direction, like physically cutting out a river, but life will always inevitably flow freely like water, undominated as it so chooses along the path of least resistance. AC family, I was happy to say this Selva de Fuego project was an utter success. That was, until I noticed the next morning, the fire ants had been busy cutting out their own path of resistance. The fluon barriers I had placed to ensure the ants remained secure inside the Selva de Fuego had weak spots. Overnight, the ants had figured out that the corners were easier to cling onto despite the fluon barrier. Oh no! So far it looked like they hadn't yet figured out a way to cross the upside down lip. But that's not all. What I spotted next caused me great concern. The rains overnight had naturally cued some guests to emerge from the nests, and there seen on one of the Frogbit Islands were full-grown male and female alates. We didn't have the time I thought we had to prepare. The fire ants were now starting to have mating flights. What was I going to do to keep all these fire ants inside? It was then that a tiny movement in the corner caught my eye. A tiny spider was lassoing some of the ants that managed to get too close. At first I asked myself, how on earth did a spider get in here? It must have come in with the plants. But what was more important was that it was at that very moment a crazy idea came to me, which would offer a great solution to both my fire ant escape problems. Oh boy. This was about to get interesting.